Namaste and welcome to this exciting new episode of Sattology, Debunking Mythology. Sat means truth and Logos means a study or science. Sattology means a science of truth or study of truth. Opposite of that is mythology, which means a science of fake lie imagination or study of fake lie imagination. It is always our attempt to bring the facts of the history, which are generally not spoken in the academic world. Like I was speaking to a Muslim scholar last week, and he was saying, why you study the history, why you need a history, because they have a lot to hide. So sometimes you have to study history to know. So like, for example, if I want to know about a person, and the best way to know about a person is to learn about his background and a group of people's background also. When you know the background, then you know what a person is or what can I expect from that person. Is very natural. So history is a very important teacher if we want to learn from it. And history also becomes a burden if we don't learn from it. And that's what the colonization happened. All my books, including the last one, Gold, Glory, and God, and the new which is coming up, have been focused on debunking the ancient misunderstandings of history and also incoherently written history. So without delay, I have a very, very special guest today who has highlighted the unarmed struggle of Indian independence. So we're going to cut off the unarmed struggle, we'll keep it. So let us welcome Sri Aman Chaudhary from Chennai, India.
Namaste to everybody. Yeah, namaste.
So Aman, I really like the title of a book, Unarmed. And you can show the book to the audience if you want to.
This is the book.
And you have cut off the un. Because most of the Western propaganda is that, and also there are Indian songs also, Bina Khadga Bina Dhal, Dedi Azadi.
Dedi Hamera Sadi.
And very interesting thing is there when Mountbatten was asked that I don't like to call anybody Lord because nobody is Lord. It is a title by the British monarchy. So when Mountbatten was asked what was Mahatma Gandhi's contribution in Indian freedom struggle? He had three replies: negligible, 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 and that's recorded. It's on YouTube. Okay, so people can check it out. So this is the British view of Indian independence struggle. And the person who was at the helm of the affairs, for whom Jawaharlal Nehru bent over backwards to please him. In fact, he refers to him in recently there was a note circulating on Twitter. He refers to him as his lord. So maybe maybe the Chacha N, I call him. Chacha N was a slave, but what about the rest? So can you throw some light and you can give a detailed answer on this, please?
Sure. So, how would you like me to just talk about this particular in summary about this particular? Okay.
Yeah, debunk that it was
debunk
not
the history. Got it. I understand.
It was not an unarmed struggle. Just debunk.
Sure. There were a lot of incidents in my personal life when I moved to the US and I traveled around. That I realized that India's history, what I learned in my school, which was about Mahatma Gandhi, about this non-violent movement where everybody laid down their weapons and sang bhajans and did satyagraha. And finally, British said, yes, you know what, it's time for me to leave and handed over the independence to India. And after that, our entire freedom struggle of history from 1920 to 1947 has been completely Gandhi-centric. Also, Gandhi is very mainstream in India. We've got Mahatma Gandhi Road. There are movies made on him. There's a lot of government spending on that narrative. Somehow, I personally, after I moved to the US, I felt that there has to be something else which is also going to be very interesting to study and research. And I came up with this whole theory that it was not the non-violent movement, or at least it was not primarily the non-violent movement. It could be a contributing factor. But there was an armed movement which started in the 1901 and ended in 1946, which is very much responsible for the Indian freedom struggle. And my book basically is, if you can think of it, is like an index which starts in 1901 and goes all the way to 1946. It talks about Savarkar's contribution, Aurobindo's contribution, Surya Sen, Bhagat Singh, Sachindranath Sanyal, a person by the name Rash Bihari Bose, whom very few people probably are aware of, but he was a magnetic personality, and I'll talk more about it in the course of time, and then finally with Subhash Chandra Bose. So it's sort of this journey which takes you through, and when you read this book and go through all the events, you will understand it was there was this very strong underlying armed movement which won us our freedom struggle. So that's the whole basis behind the book.
So one of the things is, like, in California, there is a place where Udham Singh came in El Centro. Udham Singh was staying here where I live in San Diego, and El Centro is close to me. Now, we have seen the first incidents of Indian independence movement where our heroes, British may not like them, but we like them, went into Great Britain and gave justice to a person who killed more than 1,000 people, fired more than 1,650 bullets on innocent people in Jallianwala Bagh. And
exactly.
But we have not done anything to Winston Churchill. I have called in one of my books Winston Churchill as the bulldog of Small Britain. I call it Small Britain. Bulldog of Small Britain, because Britain has been responsible for colonization or occupation of Australia, New Zealand, Canada, and the US, all four. And the American Protestants rebelled against the British to own land, because the land ownership was not possible in Europe earlier. Even today is difficult. The high taxes make it very impossible for a common man to own anything in those countries. You can own a house, but not a land. It's easy to own a house than a land. So what were the oppressive things which were there, which led to the armed struggle of India?
Sure. So this will take about 15 minutes. Can I just go through the different parts? Okay.
Please go through.
All right. Sure. So basically, I'll get to California in a bit, but around the 1901, England had a very major role in the Indian armed struggle. What I mean by England is the Indians who had gone there. So during 1901, what I call it, I call these the Pandavas of London. It was really the ignition, and there are two characters in this particular part which were very responsible. One of them was Savarkar, and the other one was Aurobindo Ghosh. I'll start with Savarkar. Savarkar went to UK as a student and started living in a hostel called India House, which was a lot of students, Indian students who were studying at Oxford and St. John's and many other colleges around there, who gathered and lived together. And this house, although it was a student hostel, was actually a hotbed of revolutionary activities. They had bomb-making factories. They had learning how to get revolvers and send it to India. They had their newspapers where, like we have Twitter and Facebook, they had their own newspaper where they published information. And they also had Indo-Paris Society, which was again ran by a lady by the name Pikaji Kama. And these were all groups were integrated with each other. And what they really did was they ignited this whole movement of the armed struggle. And one of the very important things which Savarkar did here was he did the entire research about what is the weakness of the British Empire. How can the British Empire crumble? And in his information, he called 1857 the first war of independence. And that book, he documented exactly how India can win against the British. And in short, what that book really wrote about was that if the people of India unite and the soldiers, Indian soldiers, which are working for the British government, go against the British, that will be the end of the British Empire. So that was the Achilles heel. Um, Anyways, that whole group got busted because they tried to murder a couple of people and assassination attempts. And Savarkar basically lands up in Andaman's jail, as everybody knows about it. Incidentally, there was another person who was running parallel. They were also integrated. Was a gentleman by the name Aurobindo Ghosh, whom we think of as a spiritual figure. But back in 1901, he was staunchly revolutionary. He actually came from England to India and joined Baroda University as a professor. But while he was at Baroda University, he actually started an organization called Anushilam Samiti, which again were making bombs. And he actually bombed where a British judge was killed, and that was called the Alipur bomb conspiracy. So you would think of Aurobindo Ghosh as this really spiritual figure, but in fact, somehow he got on bail and he escaped to Pondicherry, which was a French territory. However, his brother ended up being in the Andaman's jail. So this is my part one of the book, which talks about Savarkar and Ghosh and how they are interlinked and what are the activities which happened from 1901 to 1912. After that, what happens is one of the people from London escapes out and goes all the way through a navigation process to California. And he becomes the first professor of Indian origin at Stanford University. His name is Lala Hardayal. He's one of the most unknown characters in Indian history, but a very important figure nonetheless. And we talk about startups in San Francisco in right now, and like Google and everything. People don't realize in 1912 there was a startup which was made by Indians, and that movement was called the Revolutionary Movement. It was called the Gadar Movement, and Lala Hardayal was really the face of it. And what he did is he built up an army of students, and they planned to basically infiltrate the Indian regiments in the British armed forces, which were all over the world, and with the attempts that the British soldiers go against the British, Indian soldiers in the British army go against the British, and basically it would be game set over. What in theory he was really trying to do was adapt the Savarkar school of thought to imbibe a sense of nationalism and a revolutionary mindset in the Indian soldiers who were working for the British to go against their master. He was successful in Singapore, where the Indian soldiers did take over and they held it for a week before they were crushed. But in India, that whole attempt got foiled. And basically the Gadar movement, then gets diminished because that whole thing just gets crushed by the British, along with the help of the Americans, of course. Then what happens is there is something called a reignition where from the part one, which is from the Pandavas of London gang, one of the guys gets released from Andamans, and he joins Bhagat Singh and a couple of other people, and they form something called the Hindustan Republican Army. And that's really the birth of Bhagat Singh and this whole movement. And then they go through an enormous amount of revolutionary activities, which, we've watched movies about Bhagat Singh and, we know a lot. But basically, nobody knows that he's actually connected to the whole movement behind from 1901. And then we all know that Bhagat Singh gets arrested, and Sachindranath Sanyal gets arrested. They do a train heist and a series of very interesting events, which is again completely erased from our history books. The last part, which really is which wins up our independence, is the last part from 1938 to 1946. Is when Subhash Chandra Bose basically comes up in the scene. And a lot of people don't know, but the INA was actually formed by a gentleman called Rash Bihari Bose, who had escaped in the 1914, after the Gadar movement had failed, from India to Japan. And he was working as a cook in Japan, and he ended up building the Indian National Army, which was the Japanese, the Indian prisoners of war, which were captured by Japan. So he negotiates with the Japanese people and says, you know what, these are prisoners of war, but let me make an Indian army, and I will go ahead and help you win against the British. And in turn, you give us our freedom. And that's, a lot of people don't know, but it was actually Rash Bihari Bose. And I'll talk to you a bit more as we go through the story about him. And ultimately, Subhash Chandra Bose escapes through Europe, goes back to Japan, joins him, and enters the Indian territory. Now, what's very important is that 1945, Andaman and Nicobar Islands, which is now Shahid and Swaraj Island, actually had an Indian flag hoisted there. That's before 1947. A lot of people don't know about it. Also in Manipur, there was an Indian flag hoisted because Subhash Chandra Bose had actually touched down Manipur all the way through before things went bad for him, and he lost against the war ended and everything. But there was actually an Indian flag there. So that's sort of the place where after that we all know that Subhash Chandra Bose just disappeared. Now, but that's a very interesting event which happens after that. When the Indian soldiers are actually, captured, which is from the INA, and they're brought just to a Red Fort trial, and there is a public trial for it. Basically, what happens is the entire armed force, the Indian armed forces within the British, who are working for the British, they go against the British government. So, that happened in February 1946. So I have actually put in newspaper clippings about how Britishers were really feared for their lives during that time, who were living in India. And that was a dream come true for Savarkar, because he had his last laugh, where his basically verdict came through when the soldiers of Indian soldiers who are working for the British go against the British. That's the time when we will get our freedom. And finally, on March 15th, 1946, Attlee stands up, which is Prime Minister Attlee, who was the Prime Minister during that time in England, and says to the Parliament that I am sending a team of people to India to give them the freedom as speedily as possible. The word speedily is very important here, because he really just wanted to, give away, get India free. So March 15th, 1946 is actually the day when India was decided to make free. And after that, it was the series of negotiations and everything, which led to August 15th, 1947. So that in a nutshell covers the entire movement. I've made a very complex story very brief, but it gives you a gist of how the book is structured and how it goes through the flow.
So, Aman, answer me one question. Like the armed
Yeah.
struggle, like oftentimes
Hmm.
it is not highlighted because the
Hmm.
British were already weak. In my last book,
Hmm.
also Gold, Glory, and God, I've mentioned that the British were already weak in 1941. They did not have
Hmm.
the resources to manage the Indian state because they had already looted the maximum they could. They could not find
Right.
any new opportunities to loot India. And
Sure.
Mughals were very complicit in that loot when the Jahangir
Hmm.
opened all the ports without taxes from Calcutta. And
Okay.
within 50 years, they uprooted the entire Mughal dynasty.
Okay.
And so the thing is, the non-violent struggle of Mahatma Gandhi did not make sense to the British, like I just mentioned in the beginning, Mountbatten, what he said.
Right.
So
Right.
what were the different armed struggles in India which helped British feel insecure in India? I can tell you one
Sure.
example. My
Yeah. Yeah.
ancestors
Yeah.
in Sholapur, Maharashtra, and my ancestors, they never allowed British to rule much. And
Okay.
it was the body bags. They would come in with bodies and they'll go back in body bags. That was the scenario.
Okay.
So what
Okay.
what are
Okay.
the specific instances of armed struggle which made British insecure in India?
Sure. So it was not one per se. There has actually been a series of events, and I'll highlight a few. The ones which really they felt there are a lot of tremors. One was Lord Hardinge, who was the viceroy, uh, which was the Mountbatten equivalent during the 1913, and there was an attempt on his life. Although the attempt was unsuccessful, he was very incapacitated. And that basically was also the day when the British were moving their headquarters from Calcutta to Delhi. And before that, there was series of attempts in West Bengal by Aurobindo Ghosh's unit, which again, there was the Christmas Day attack and a variety of other attacks during that time frame. If I go in each one, it will become very complex. So I have noted that in my book. Then during the 1914s to 1920 was the Ghadar movement. Now, a lot of people don't realize that Jallianwala Bagh is actually linked to the Ghadar movement, you know, which again is a lot of people don't understand that the Jallianwala Bagh was took place because of Rowlatt Act. People going against the Rowlatt Act, and Rowlatt Act was initiated because of the Ghadar movement. Just because 2 years before that, there was a widespread, basically widespread. Like a movement to go against the British by the Indian soldiers. So that's how that particular event happened. Then we all know about Bhagat Singh. I mean, the wonders what he has done in terms of reigniting the whole movement. Then there was also a person by the name Surya Sen, who again carried a lot of attacks. Now you have to also understand these guys are all linked with each other. So it's like a chain link where this group is connected to this group is connected to this group, and there's a technology transfer. There is a bomb making technology transfer. There are arms being sent. There are books being smuggled. A lot of information which is being there over there. And then finally, it was Subhash Chandra Bose who got on and he carried forward himself, took the army through Singapore, entered Andamans, hoisted a flag there, went to Manipur, hoisted a flag there. So it was, as I said, it was not one event. It was a series of events which led up to this.
No, you're right, because a lot of series of events, and sometimes
Yeah,
this struggle of Indians is
yeah,
forgotten. Like it's not
right.
mentioned in the history textbooks. And
Yeah, yeah,
somehow
yeah.
when people like Kangana Ranaut and all these people, they speak that India got
Hmm.
their real independence in 2014. Uh,
Right.
why do you think they say like that? I agree with that. But what is your opinion
Right.
that India got independence
Yeah.
in
So I
2014?
I, I will tell you. Prior to 2014, what I realized is that we Indians, although we have freedom of speech and everything, there was a particular thought phobia where if you speak for Hindus, you were named as particular thing. You spoke for Ram Mandir, you were again labeled as something. You spoke about armed struggle, you were named about something. You talked about Savarkar in a very bright light. Again, you are labeled something which is normally I have been called by many people as Sanghi, in a very negative tone. But after 2014, what has happened is there has been a freedom of thought to a great degree. And there are a lot of alternative narratives which are coming out. And now, this fire has burned full swing, so it cannot really be stopped. So although people know Indian history textbooks, whatever is written is wrong, and mainly Indian history textbook is nothing but history of Delhi, and a lot of information about the Mughal Empire and very little about our Indian heritage. So everybody are now to a channel like yours, Sattology, which talks but nothing about the truth. So you are doing a lot of good work for the nation as well for bringing this information out. Did I make myself clear? I'm sorry. It was on that.
Thank you, because the even the most of the American textbooks, they
Mhm.
follow a Max Muller mindset,
Right.
the and the mindset of the colonial powers. And
Right.
that's why I do support critical race theory in a big way. But
Right.
I
Right.
usually say that critical race theory is just a facade, but the basic problem is critical faith theory, that their
Okay.
faith is somewhat better than critical race, because we as
Right.
Indians don't believe in race theory by nature, by
No.
design.
No.
For
Yes.
us you can have a white skin or a brown skin or a black skin, it doesn't matter. Herbert Hope
Yeah.
Risley, the British anthropologist, in
Uh-huh.
1901 forced the caste theory in the 1901 census of India. Then he
Yes. Yeah.
said
Yeah. Yeah.
seven castes are upper caste, rest everything is lower. Most of the Indians don't
Right.
even talk about it.
Right.
The word caste is a Western term, it's a European term, and
Yeah.
Indian term is completely different.
Right.
Did you think that the Indian freedom struggle leaders followed a caste system?
No, not at all. In fact, I've had this argument with various people, and just to finish your topic about caste, caste comes from a Portuguese word called casta. So we've had jati and the varna system, but let's not get into that part because that we'll dissect the topic into another way. No, Indian freedom struggle, especially the revolutionary movements. You have to understand that these people were not actually fighting for Raj as well. They were not fighting for Rajya, which I sometimes feel Nehru was fighting for Rajya, for rule. They were fighting for Rashtra. So for them, it really didn't matter whether, if you look at 1901 movement, there was Bikaji Kama. She was a Parsi lady who wore a sari and went to Germany, and she actually hoisted India's first flag. And she spoke in Germany about freedom of India and all of those things. Then, if you come to later in the time, there were a lot of Muslim contribution, a lot of Hindu contribution. So they were all in hand, and their whole purpose was Rashtra. Then, if you look at Bose, he actually founded a regiment called Rani Lakshmi Bai, Rani Jhansi Regiment, and he actually employed women soldiers. So what gender you're talking about? We were, right from those times, we were at a very fierce gender equality. And then Savarkar's key people like Habibullah Ram, who was his right hand, was actually a Muslim. So as I mentioned, they didn't really care about the Hindu, Muslim, or caste system or this. There was one mindset, Rashtra. Caste has uh, become a mainstream narrative, really, in India in post-independence. Uh, Pre-independence, to my limited knowledge, especially in the freedom movement, I never really came across anything where a Dalit could not fight, or nothing of that sort, which at least I came to an understanding.
So if you look at the Indian freedom struggle across, so
Mm-hmm.
1919, India was divided. Afghanistan was separated from India. 1919.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
1947, Pakistan was separated.
Right.
1935, the word Pakistan was invented in London.
Right. 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 Right.
1948,
Right.
Burma was separated. And
Right.
probably in 1948, Sri Lanka was also separated. At that time, it was called
Okay.
Simala or Ceylon.
Okay. Ceylon. Yeah. 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 Yeah.
So, and the word Pakistan was invented in 1935, like a Sir Samad Rali.
In London.
In a British.
Yeah.
Sir.
Yeah. Yeah. In London.
In
Yeah.
London.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
Right.
according to you, and then when the British left India, they divided India into 661 independent states.
61 independent states. Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So,
yes.
so today, if you look at from the Indian freedom struggle and everything,
Mm-hmm.
shouldn't India have demolished all the British and the Mughal pieces of
Mm-hmm.
what do you call it, symbols of humiliation of Hindus,
Mm-hmm.
just like Vietnam did, just like Thailand did, just like many other countries did? Don't you think that would have been proper respect to the Indian freedoms people who led the Indian students? Just a random question.
Yes. So I'll touch a sensitive topic here, but when I was researching my book, I found very less monuments in Pakistan of our Indian freedom struggle compared to India. So, like, like even a Bhagat Singh memorial or something must be there, but it was very hard for me to find those particular things. But in India, whether they should have been demolished or non-demolished, I am to that opinion is there is nothing wrong in it being there. It's a magnificent structure, maybe architecturally, but there needs to be a reconciliation. It should not be that this was given to us, by the British. It should be like, yes, we built it with our blood, with our money. The British have made it with our money. And I am to the opinion that there is nothing in these structures going there, but the entire history of this should be known to the people, and there should be thought freedom in exploring different narratives of history. Now, whether we go and destroy a certain statue or let it be there, I may have a different opinion than other people on that, but that's how I look at it. So.
Aman, one last question. So when the Indian freedom struggle is rewritten in the Indian textbooks, if and when,
right?
If I'm saying,
if and when.
So, what are the things which you'd like to highlight to be taught to kids between 8 to 19?
Okay. So the great part is that thanks to YouTube channels like yours, whether Indian history textbooks are rewritten or not rewritten, I think in coming years will have very little value, because today whenever the kids are learning anything, uh, they will go ahead and do their research. So they do not go ahead and count upon a single textbook. So as long as YouTube and social media is alive and there's thought freedom, they will get to know the history. Supposedly, Indian history textbook does include, I would like them to include about Savarkar, about Aurobindo Ghosh, about Surya Sen, about Rash Bihari Bose, about Subhash Chandra Bose, about the fact that we actually had an Indian flag, Indian government in Andaman and Nicobars in 1946, in Manipur, where we had our own flag hoisted. So those are things which need to be known, that we were actually a very Kshatriya nation, and nothing was given to us in bhik, if I may use a very crude word, but we actually won our freedom. And uh, and we Indians have an ability to do things which are just extraordinary. Like, look at us sending a rocket to Mars. About with what resources, with what budgets, but we are able to do that, right? So my thing is that we should have an entire chapter or entire syllabus, part of syllabus, which also talks about the armed movement. So these ways, the students have a broad view about armed and non-armed, and let them then decide what is right, what is wrong, what is good from this, what is bad from this. Let there be that history teach you. You got to be very important. You need to know where you're coming from. That's what history is all about. So,
So, you said it all right. You said it very well. Now, that was my last one, but I have one more query which has come from the audience. Is
sure.
that the most of the, if you look at the American history, I'm talking about
Mhm.
American history since you lived here, is written from the point of view of colonizers.
Exactly. Yeah.
India is still a native country. It's still the original people,
Right. Right.
and the language we are speaking in English. We may
Right.
say that it came from Sanskrit. Yes, did come from
Right.
Sanskrit, but
Right.
still it's a language of England. England is a small
Right.
nation within United Kingdom,
Right.
very small.
Right.
Now we are not able to even change the constitution, which is still most of the legal provisions are British, which are not
Right.
relevant to India,
Right.
like the Policing Act, India Policing Act.
Right.
So Indian
Right. Right.
police, everyone is scared of Indian police because they are a
Right.
colonizers, part of the
Right.
colonizing nations.
Right. Right.
What is your view on that? Do you think those articles need to be dropped?
Yes, absolutely, and they will be dropped. You have to also understand that it's easier said than done. There is a lot of things, especially when it comes to constitution. Um, there is a lot of political processes, and a lot of state politics is very divisive in nature. So there are a lot of balancing acts which people need to, which Narendra Modi government needs to do. So they have done a series of things. Look at Kashmir, look at Ram Mandir, look at the number of roads which are being made in India. So eh, there is today a world-class railway station which is being opened up. The way they have fought COVID. So there are a lot of positives which they have done, and I think there will be a time when all these things will be looked into. And I think when Narendra Modi just decides something, he just goes full swing. But till that time has not come for it, he will not touch it. So he's possibly have it on his map of things to do, and he will do it when the time is right, when the all he's worked out all the issues, like what happened in the farmer bill, if you know the way the media went around. But he stood his gate, he stood his guard, and he's been there. So those things will happen. We have to. In India, it's very difficult that it just happens quickly, just because India is extremely complex politically. You know.
Thank you so much, Aman, for coming on the show today and sharing your
Right.
thoughts. And for all the viewers who are watching and will watch on YouTube, do let us know your
Sure.
feedback. Our
Yeah.
only goal is to educate and also empower you with knowledge and
Right.
debunking
Okay.
mythology. So don't believe in all the mythological stories about the Indian independence struggle. India did not win independence through non-violent means because British would not understand it. If you look at the colonial
Okay.
history, they will never understand anyone winning. So one point comes to my mind: was Mahatma Gandhi a mascot to defang Hindus?
It's actually complicated. I have. I know I'm bringing up a controversial subject, but there's actually a new book which is out called The South African Gandhi, where Gandhi is actually a soldier working for the British government in South Africa, where he actually fought a war. A lot of things are coming up now. I don't really understand exactly how Gandhiji, was he part of the British? Was he not part of the British? Was there a quasi understanding? Was he completely nationalistic? Uh, it's it's a very complex subject, and one has to go deep into the history to understand. But one thing was sure, that Gandhiji, for all the threat the British he posed to the British, Gandhiji Nehru never went to Andamans. So if you look at the the people who are imprisoned in Andamans, you will really realize that they were the ones who British hated the most. Um, so I'm not able to answer your question. Sorry about that. Very clearly, because I'm not that educated on that topic as yet. So,
Yeah, like you mentioned many books, and I think slowly the impression is
yeah.
being dawning that
Right.
Nehru and Gandhi
Mhm.
were the brown Angrej. In America we call them coconuts, where
Yes.
outward skin was brown, and I have quoted Gandhi in some of my books also, but
Right.
from
Right.
the point of
Mhm.
view of his touching Bhagavad Gita. He touched Bhagavad Gita. He believed in Bhagavad Gita. That's main point. But
Which
whether he followed Bhagavad Gita is a different matter altogether. Yeah.
right.
Anyways,
In fact, there's a shloka of Bhagavad Gita. So it's actually two shlokas together. I cannot recollect it because I have read extensively. And if you read half that shloka, you will feel that is Gandhi. But if you read the other half, you will feel it's Gandhi and both together. So that's the thing. Can I just give a closing remark on your show
yes, please,
to the
please.
viewers?
Yes.
Yeah. So this book is released worldwide. It's on Amazon USA, Amazon Canada, Amazon UK, Amazon Japan, Amazon France. Also, it is available on Google Play and Kindle ebook. The Google Play and the Kindle ebook is free, so you don't need to pay a penny, and you can just download it and read it. And the book costs, I think, $5 or $6 on Amazon.com. The other part, the way I've written this book is that you can maximum read it in 2 days, in 2 evenings, actually, in about 6 or 7 hours. It's well spaced with a lot of newspaper cuttings, with a lot of maps. So you can think of this as an index to the armed freedom struggle, to the where the UN is cancelled. So, thank you.
The point which people usually get confused about Mahatma Gandhi on both sides.
Mhm.
Shloka just saying Mahatmanastu Mam Partha Vidhi. That is the one. If you could go by the
Okay.
definition of Bhagavad Gita, then
Uh-huh.
the Mahatma title is not relevant. And
Okay.
the second is, and it is established by many speakers in India. And
Right.
to go by the definition of Bhagavad Gita, then the 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 non-violent way of overthrowing British is practically impossible, because the reason
It's
is
not possible.
because
Uh-huh.
British have never left any territory. Look at the Middle East, the entire mess is created by
Mhm.
them. Look at India, Pakistan, the entire mess is created by them. Look at USA, look at Australia, look at New Zealand, you can look at Canada. All these are occupied lands. and look at the
Right.
mess they have created. Today
Right.
CRT is against the British system of governance, which is still there. Anyway,
Right.
thank you very much for coming on the show, and thank you all the viewers.
Thanks a lot. Thank you very much.
Share
And
your comments.
we'll let me know if there's anything else. Yeah. Thank you. Thanks a lot. Namaste to everybody. Thank you for being so early. Thanks.